Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morgan. We're out the Motor City Mad Mouth. No, what I played here isn't rock and roll from the Motown sound, but I'll tell you what, this is a Motown type of night here on the Sports Exchange. I'm joined by my regular Thursday co-host, Mel Farr. How you doing tonight, Mel?
I'm doing great, Scott. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I'm also joined by my long-time original Sports Exchange host, George Eichorn, back in Detroit. How you doing, George?
Hey, good, Scott. Good to be with you, and good to be with you, Mel.
Thank you.
A great
Look
show.
forward to it.
Yeah,
absolutely. Look forward to it.
We're going to have a lot of fun. So with that said, okay, let's talk about what was like for us to watch your dad play. Mel, obviously your dad was one of the finer running backs in Detroit, and George Eichorn had an opportunity, and I had a chance to watch him play. Why don't we reflect a little bit down memory lane? George, what do you know about Mel Farr Sr.?
Well, I'll tell you what. That was the time when I was just a young man. I was about 11, 12 years old, and I was just starting to get my teeth wet and following the Tigers and the Lions. Those were my two favorite teams, the Tigers and the Lions. I had a great time following your dad's career, Mel Jr. Your dad helped light up the field there with the Lions, with guys like Greg Landry and Tommy Vaughn and Joe Schmidt and Alex Karras and Dick LeBeau and Dick Duran and Ed Flanagan. I mean, there were just so many great, Earl McCullough. There were so many great Lions. I mean, and that was such a great time for me because, like I said, I was just getting into pro football as a fan and a spectator. And your dad was just lightning on the field. I mean, Altie Taylor and your dad in the backfield, and I know your dad's career was kind of cut short too. The life of an NFL running back is not a long one, as we all know, Mel. But it was just fantastic watching your dad play football at Old Tiger Stadium in Detroit, the corner of Michigan and Trumbull.
Yep. Well, that's very kind of you. And I was young when he was playing football. I remember very little. I can remember maybe going to some games. I can't tell you what happened in the games. I do remember when Chuck Hughes passed. I remember that. And I remember going to training camp sometimes when I was out at Cranbrook. And I remember more after my dad stopped playing. And we used to go, we were season ticket holders when they moved out to the Silver Dome. And we used to go to games all the time at the Silver Dome. And we'd go into the locker room. And I remember when I was a little kid and my dad took us, the Lions were playing the Raiders. And my dad took us into the locker room and I met Lester Hayes. And I looked at how big he was. And I said, my God, that's a big man to play cornerback. I mean, Lester, he had to be about 6'2", 6'3", 230. And I don't remember. I might have been in junior high school at that particular time, and he was a big man to play corner. And I remember, when they played the Giants one game, and Lawrence Taylor intercepted the pass and took it back for a touchdown. I remember watching Gas Snow. I remember more watching after my dad played because we used to go out there. Obviously he still had friends out there. Dexter Bussey was there, Len Barney, Charlie Sanders. Those were some of the people that he played with were his good friends. Charlie Weaver, a bunch of guys like that. We used to go out there and support the Lions. I mean, we're long-time season ticket holders. So I remember more from after, but I do remember a little bit of spending the night with him in training camp and stuff like that, and going to the little juice machines. You get all the juice that you wanted, till your stomach exploded. But as far as him playing, I don't remember much other than when he got ready to retire. I remember everybody coming up to me and asking me if we were going to move because he had gotten traded, or he was going to be traded to Houston, which is obviously close to his hometown in Beaumont, Texas, 70 miles east of where he grew up at. And everybody was concerned that we were going to be leaving. I was in the second grade, and everybody thought we were going to be moving because there was talk of my dad being traded. And actually, I think they guaranteed him. I think it was, back then it was a lot of money. I think it was $100,000 a year for 2 years, and they said they're going to build the team around him, and there's going to be guaranteed money. And my dad said, man, I'm shot. I'm done. And they play on AstroTurf. He said his knees were done. He said he didn't want to play anymore. So I think at 29 years old, around there, 28, 29 years old, he retired and took everything that he had and borrowed $1,500 from somebody. I can't remember who it was. It was another NFL player, and took that and invested it in a business that had been bankrupt 3 times, which ended up being Mel Farr Ford. So he took that and parlayed, took that money he had, which is almost $50,000, and parlayed it into becoming the largest African American business in the country. So I remember a lot more after he played than I did when he played.
Mel, amazingly enough, George Eichorn and I were both at the game where Chuck Hughes died. When you think of how many people were actually at that game, I'll never forget that night. I couldn't believe it. I asked my dad, does that normally happen? He said, no, it doesn't. And I had nightmares over that game. And to think that George and I were there, and I know a few other people that were there, it was one of the most unbelievable, surreal things that I've ever seen, And did your dad ever talk to you about that day at all, about Chuck Hughes' death at all?
I was young when it happened. I think I was watching the game on TV, and that's how I remember seeing it.
Yeah.
I don't know if we talked about it then. We never talked about it later. It's not, as a football player, that's something that, you really don't talk about. My brother played when Mike Utley got hurt.
Oh, yeah.
And also the linebacker. He was playing with the Lions when that linebacker got hurt and almost died out there in the field.
Oh yeah, you're talking about.
I think he went to Texas A&M.
Was it Reggie Brown? I think, and I was also at that. I was at that game, and I was also at the Mike Utley game. Can you believe it or not, Mel? I'm bad luck on all 3 of them. Reggie Brown and Mike Utley.
Yeah, Mike Utley. My brother actually caught a touchdown on that play, and and Mike Utley is there. So I mean, as football players, that's something that you really, you really try to take that out of your head. Obviously, every time you cross that white line, there's an opportunity for you to get hurt, and sometimes it can be serious. But it's just something that we really never talked about. I really never remember having that conversation with my dad about Chuck Hughes.
Well, you're probably not missing anything, but yeah, I was at the Mike Utley game, and it was a. I don't think it was a non-contact play either, but obviously, the rigors of the Pontiac Silverdome being AstroTurf on top of concrete, that was a tough place to play without a doubt. So yeah. Yeah,
somehow or another, something happened and his head went into the ground.
Yeah.
I think his foot got caught or something, and his head went into the ground, and that was that.
Yeah, but your dad, what a heck of a business, Mel Farr Ford, the way he built that into the empire he did, right, George? I'll tell you what, I don't know about you, George, but we drove around it over at Oak Park, Michigan, Mel. I think that's where it was was it Greenfield? And is it
10 Mile and Greenfield?
10 Mile and Greenfield. Yeah. I know Oak Park, Michigan stuff, Mel. Come on. My dad had a sporting goods store out there. You remember All Pro Sporting Goods at 9 Mile and Coolidge?
I was young back then. I wasn't driving when he first got that store. I didn't start hanging around there until I was in junior high school. I was working there on weekends.
But you know the area, 9 and Coolidge. My dad had a sporting goods store.
I know exactly where 9 and Coolidge is. Yeah.
Yeah, my dad had a sporting goods store called All Pro Sporting Goods. Just a little trivia that I haven't told you after all this time we've been working together. Why not, man? But yeah, Oak Park, Michigan, Mel. My goodness, right?
Yep.
Go ahead, George.
Well, Scott, as you know, I used to work for IBM, and that was my stopping grounds. Remember? Because the IBM tower was built between Greenfield and the Southfield Freeway on 9 Mile Road, right next to Channel 2, WJBK. And so we used to go. Unfortunately, Mel, I never went into your dad's dealership, but we used to go to the Jewish Bagels. They made fresh, hot bagels every morning there, right near your dad's dealership. There was a real good or two real good Chinese restaurant right around there.
Oh, yeah.
And there were some fine dining places that we explored as we took our 1 hour lunch break from the big blue IBM. So, Scott and Mel, I'm very familiar with that area, Oak Park, and right on the border of Southfield. Sure.
Yeah, that was a heck of a place, too, because you know what? And I can't believe my memory allows me to do this, but there was an apartment complex, Mel, called Rue Versailles. Remember that area? Your dad's, my grandparents actually lived over there right near a Dunkin' Donuts. Can you believe that? I actually remember Rue Versailles.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was. Yeah. I remember that Dunkin' Donuts. Yeah.
It was a stone's throw away.
I've been to Dunkin' Donuts quite a few times.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, me too. Join everybody.
One thing I got to tell you, Mel, is that recently, and you probably never met him either. I think he was one of your dad's teammates. Just died. Tommy Vaughn. No,
I didn't know that. Yeah, he was
the guy from the secondary. Yeah. Tommy Vaughn just died. I believe it was just a few days back, or maybe a week ago. Scott and Mel.
Right.
I did not know that. I did not know that. Yeah, I remember Tommy Vaughn well.
Yep, we lost somebody from your dad's era, and that's sad. But you know who's still going strong is Joe Schmidt. You know, the All-Pro Hall of Famer. Well, of course, Lombardi's doing great too, but Joe is doing great. I mean, he's aging, but he comes back for all those alumni reunions at Ford Field. One game out of the year, they invite back the former players, and of course, this past year was really good because they had the 100th anniversary of the NFL, and a lot of your dad's teammates came back at that time. But Coach Schmidt, Joe went from linebacker to head coach.
He's outliving all his players.
Yes. And you know the funny thing about that is, with Russ Thomas, and Scott, I know you agree with this, they should have never fired Joe Schmidt as head coach.
Oh, no doubt about that. Come on, George.
He got a raw deal, and that Russ Thomas guy, sometimes he just, people couldn't stand him as general manager.
Well, Mel, if you think about it, Joe Schmidt was such a good coach. He was the last full-time Lions coach to finish with a 500 record before Jim Caldwell had one. And, of course, unfortunately, he didn't stay around long enough. And I thought that Jim Caldwell should never have been fired either. You talk about two bad mistakes in Lions history, Detroit Lions history, Jim Caldwell and Joe Schmidt. I mean, those are awful coaching moves, Mel.
Yeah, that's true. They brought in Rick Frisano after that. I know my dad couldn't stand. My dad had issues with Coach Frisano.
Oh, did he?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think he's still alive, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong on that. He might have died the last year or two. But the other thing I was going to mention to you guys is that, I had season tickets. Now, when I had season tickets, the first batch of season tickets, Mel, that I bought was in the upper deck, the center field bleachers. And for football, the Lions called it Coach's Corner. They came up with this creative name. Well, what it was a huge party up there. We would pass the flask and we would drink booze. And, there were some mighty cold days, as you know, Scott and Mel, up at the Tiger Stadium when that wind blew in the October and November and December. But then we made a very curious move, me and my friend Dan. We decided to change our season tickets, and we requested something better, we thought. Well, they put us in the first row near the visitors' dugout. We got the very first row, but you can hardly see anything because you're at field level way in the end zone. Because remember the end zone, like by first base at Tiger Stadium, remember that? First base, and then the field went all the way out to left field. The 100 yards. So let me tell you this. So Thanksgiving Day, I went, and they were on national television, and Altie Taylor made an unbelievable catch, and he took the ball, caught it, scored a touchdown. His momentum took him through the end zone, right to, banging up against the first row where me and my buddy Danny were at. So I got on national TV because I gave him a big hug. Candy's Packer fans do. Didn't quite do that, jump into the stands, but it was just a great thrill for me as a fan to see Altie Taylor make that catch, and like I said, his momentum came right up against me in the front row and gave a big hug. And I tried to steal the ball, Mel, but they wouldn't let me keep it.
They wouldn't let you keep it, right?
No. Those days, remember, Scott, they would kick you out if you tried keeping the football.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that happened back then that they did, but I think they can afford a football or two now, don't you think, Mel?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it used to be a fine to put a football in the stands.
Yeah, well.
And Mel, it was unsportsmanlike conduct also. You got a flag, too. Yeah. Yep.
Huh.
Hey, Mel, what do you think about this situation now? And I know you and Scott have talked about it too, but Scott, we talked off the air, and the NFL has already gotten its kind of like first experience here of what's going on in this country by cutting out 2 exhibition games, preseason games. Your thoughts on that, Mel?
Yeah, I think it's I'm still kind of a wait and see mode when this when this whole COVID thing first came out, and Scott and I were talking about it, and I thought I thought by football season we'd have our arms around this thing, and we'd be able to resume life as normal, as usual. I mean, I never thought of not having a football season, but now as we're just a month away, or really less than 30 days away from training camps opening up. I don't see how realistically we can have a football season. I mean, it's a contact sport. There's so many people involved. The difference between the starter, in particular, the quarterback position. If the quarterback goes down, okay, that's one person. But then you got the whole quarterback room. It has to be isolated. So, getting somebody off the street and then trying to get them acclimated, especially this year where they didn't have any kind of mini camps or anything like that, so there people aren't familiar with the verbiage, and mental reps is much different than taking physical reps out there on the field. And to have somebody come in off the street and try to run your offense, I don't know how you do that. But even before you even get to that point, I don't know how they're going to be able to wrap their arms around this virus. If somebody gets sick, how do you handle that? Because football, you're in very close quarters. So then you had to quarantine an entire team, basically. And I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you do it. I don't see how they're going to do it. I really don't. The NBA has a good chance to finish because they're putting everybody in the bubble. You don't have as many people. As long as the stars don't get affected, the NBA is going to be fine. Baseball, I think they have a pretty good chance of being able to do it because there's not that contact that you have involved with football. But the thing about it is the travel, going to different states, getting depending on how they behave when they're on the road. What are they doing? Are they going out? Are they intermingling with people, or are they going to restaurants and things of that nature? And then how if somebody does get sick, how that affects what's the protocol when somebody gets sick? My whole thing is what happens when somebody gets sick. But like I've been telling Scott, the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, all the professional teams, they're going to figure it out one way or the other. My biggest concern has always been with the college kids, because there's nobody looking out for the college kids. The NCAA is all about money. I mean, you see what's happening at Stanford right now because of COVID. They had to get rid of 11 sports, which is something that I thought was probably going to happen. I mean, a lot of these athletic departments are operating on razor-thin margins, and then to have something happen where they didn't have the opportunity to have the NCAA tournament this year because of COVID, so they lost all that revenue. And, you look at how expensive it could probably be to put on football games, to have a football game. You're not going to have the crowd at the football game, so you're not going to be getting the ticket revenue from the football games, how that really affects the athletic department in those non-revenue sports. So I think, you can see a lot more schools doing what Stanford did and doing away with some varsity sports. This virus is like something I've never seen before. You can go from being asymptomatic to, the thing just tearing you apart. I mean, where you have to get limbs amputated, talking about lung transplants and all that kind of stuff, all the way to death and everything in between. So that's the scary thing about this virus. I mean, they can say, most people are asymptomatic, or most people, they get sick and then they resolve, after, 7-10 days, whatever the case may be. But who wants to take the chance of that one kid not resolving? The kid who has the sickle cell trait, this could be very detrimental, and may not know he has a sickle cell trait. Because he's never been tested for it, and wouldn't find out until he went to high altitude or something like that he had a sickle cell trait, or the kids who are diabetic and they get exposed to this. I mean, so I just think for college kids, I think that what the Ivy League has done, I think that's great. Obviously, those are academic institutions first. They just kind of tolerate sports, and what they're doing, I think is smart. I think, you see the Big Ten, they're only going to play conference games. I don't know what the difference is, between conference and non-conference. I don't know, but
three games. Yeah, Mel, it's 3 games that you have to lop off per team.
Yeah, Yeah, I understand, but I mean, I don't understand. If you're not gonna play those games, why are you gonna play the conference games? I mean, what's the difference? If you're playing, Michigan State versus playing Eastern Michigan, I mean, I don't understand.
Right, the softer schedule.
I don't understand that. But my biggest concern is the college kids. Who's looking out for them? Those athletes.
For whatever it's worth, let me just mention some of the key games that they're going to be missed by, and I'm only bringing it out there, okay? No Iowa versus Iowa State, an in-state matchup. Michigan State was actually supposed to come down here to play the Miami Hurricanes over at Hard Rock Stadium. Ohio State,
that's right.
Yeah, they were. Ohio State was supposed to go to Nike territory and play the Oregon Ducks. And then in a neutral site game, Wisconsin was supposed to take on Notre Dame over at Wrigley Field. Michigan was actually going to go to Washington and take on the Huskies in Seattle. And then Penn State was going down to Virginia to take on the Hokies. So those are the 6 marquee games that won't take place. And of course, these are big contracts now, obviously, because of COVID-19. Knowing the nature of these games, I'm sure that they'll find a way to work them in a schedule, move them around as they always do, especially considering a lot of these are pretty interesting matchups, Mel. I mean, with that said, of the 6 games, Mel, that I mentioned, which ones would you hate to see, go, and which ones are the most intriguing ones? So let's have some fun with this a little bit, Mel.
Well, I hate to see all of them go, to be honest with you. I mean, Anytime the Big Ten comes out and plays the Pac-12, that's always good TV to watch. Anytime they come down south, the Big Ten comes down south, that's always good television to watch.
Right.
Michigan State's kind of intriguing because they got a new coach there, a new regime.
Right.
It would have been nice to see how they'd look against Virginia Tech. I'd love to see. You said Penn State. Who did you play Virginia Tech?
Here, Michigan State would have taken on Miami, Mel, down at Hard Rock Stadium.
Miami. Wow, I would have loved to see that game.
Yeah, me too. I was actually thinking about it.
Miami. Those are 2 programs. Obviously, you got a new coach down there. This is his 2nd year down there.
Yeah,
in Miami.
Manny Diaz.
Trying to turn the program around.
Yeah.
They got a new coach at Michigan State coming over from Colorado late.
Right.
Check over that program. Like to see what see what they look like. See what that team's gonna look like. Under Mike D'Antoni, they kind of played a certain kind of a way. They were kind of a run football team, kind of like an old Big Ten football team. They're very tough, very disciplined. A good solid football team. I'd like to see how that offense is going to change with the new coach. So that would have been a good game.
Mel, you want
game to watch.
You want to know an irony about that, Mel? I was I think in 1982, I saw Michigan State take on Miami. Howard Schnellenberger was the coach, and Earl Morrill, I think, was the quarterback's coach. And I believe Miami barely squeaked that one out. You talk about a few years ago. Yeah, Michigan State, Miami, I would have been interested there, but would have been, should have been, hello 2020. Now, in terms of Penn State, they were the ones that would have taken on Virginia Tech. That would have been an interesting one. And I got to give you this one, Mel. Michigan against Washington, a Pac-12 Big Ten showdown. Those are always like Ohio State, Oregon, the same thing. But how about the intriguing one in the Midwest, where you had Wisconsin against Notre Dame at Wrigley Field?
Yeah, I think Notre Dame was. I think they're overrated. I mean, I think it would have been a good game to watch. I think Wisconsin would have won that game.
Right.
Notre Dame still. They're still riding off that Notre Dame name. It's a tough job. I mean, it's not like it was 30 years ago. That job where you got the best players at Notre Dame. A lot of the best players aren't going north anymore.
Right.
A lot of people were intrigued by Notre Dame because of that television contract. They're on TV every week.
Right.
As a kid, that's what you want. You want to be on TV all the time. Well, now, there's, 300 games on TV, now, or however many games there are. I mean, every team is on television now. So, why leave the South and go up north to a Notre Dame when you can go to LSU or something like that? Or you can go to Miami. You can go to one of those schools in, Alabama, Georgia. You can stay down south as opposed to going north. And you're going to get as much exposure as you would at a school like Notre Dame. But, obviously, because I really, for whatever reason, I really don't like Notre Dame. So I would like to see that game just to see how badly Wisconsin would beat up on them.
Oh, Candy's loving that, Mel. Let me tell you this. Wisconsin and Notre Dame is called the Alvarez Bowl, the Barry Alvarez Bowl, just so you know that, all right? And don't kid yourself, Wisconsin is a very steady, good program. Year in and year out, they continue to remain at the higher echelon of the Big Ten. You know, they're always in it every year. Yeah, I think Notre Dame's a bit overrated. And when they got to the national championship game, they got thumped. So you have to kind of wonder what type of schedule, even though they have a partial affiliate with the ACC. That doesn't matter to me.
Partial ACC, yeah.
Right, but I agree with you.
So the ACC is not very good.
There you go.
The ACC is not very good.
Sorry, George. Mel's not a Notre Dame backer, pal. So.
Oh well, I didn't figure any of you guys would be. That's my second team, Mel, behind Michigan and Michigan State, or my third team. Late broadcaster Kevin Joyce of WJR Radio took me and two other of his friends down to Notre Dame, and we had the great experience of experiencing the whole weekend there, from soup to nuts, getting there on a Friday and going to coach's pep rally. You know, it was just a fantastic experience. And I know other college campuses do the same thing, but just to be Catholic and be able to go through that whole ritual of the Notre Dame weekend was really something special. And that game that I saw was one of the biggest shockers of all time, because that put a bubble in Notre Dame's aspirations, because of a team named Boston College came into town and beat Notre Dame on that Saturday afternoon in November.
You know, Mel,
huge upset.
Mel, I used to
might remember.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, that's the only time I ever was at Notre Dame. But yeah, what an upset it was! They just, oh my God, you wouldn't believe. You could hear a pin drop after that final horn, whatever you want to call it, went. It was just a huge upset when Notre Dame lost that game. And but yeah, I agree with you, Mel. I mean, they are constantly hyped. I mean, they're always in the Sports Illustrated Top 20 or USA Today, whatever, Top 10. And, you know, they're living off their name. And Brian Kelly, I'm thinking they got to move on from him. I mean, he's done a decent job, but, again, no championships, just like Jim Harbaugh, no championships. And then they fall flat in if they ever get to the BCS round. And, yeah, I'm thinking Notre Dame also, and they lost a lot of good players this year in the draft and seniors and stuff graduating. So, but that's interesting.
Well, you know, Notre Dame, it's just not, it's not a good job anymore. I mean, Brian Kelly's not a bad coach. He's a good coach. It's just a tough job.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the same job as it was when Lou Holtz was there, and the guy from Moeller High School that went up there and messed up the program for a little while, Jerry Fouts.
Yeah.
But it's not the same program anymore. It's harder to recruit at Notre Dame. Although the campus is beautiful, you know, with the stadium right there on campus, that's something that I didn't have at UCLA. We didn't have a stadium on campus. But, you know, I've been to a football game up there at Notre Dame. It's very nice. You know, the atmosphere is great. It's a raucous crowd. But, you know, he got better players at Cincinnati than he did, you know, than he's getting at Notre Dame.
Right.
Now, the one thing I would tell you, I see how Notre Dame recruits, and they do a very good job as far as how they recruit. And you know, they're going to go to every state, and they're going to go to the private schools, and they'll pluck the best players from the private schools from each state. That's how they recruit, because they know they really can't compete in the public school system. But in the private schools, you know, they get obviously going to have smart kids there. And, you know, you get the top players from those schools that are ranked in each state, and that's how they've been accumulating their talent. You know, I see a lot of kids from private schools, you know, they're in the top, you know, 100 or whatever in the state of Georgia, and they'll go to Notre Dame, and they do that at every state. So they have a method to their madness as far as how they recruit, but it's still very difficult for them to get the elite talent that they need in order to compete at the level of the Alabamans and the Clemsons and LSUs. I mean, it's just hard. Georgia, it's very tough. It's tough for them to compete.
Yeah, very tough. You're right.
Mel, not that I'm a Notre Dame hater, because I really don't care for them, but Miami Hurricanes used to lay a whipping on them every so often, too. How did you like those Miami Notre Dame games? I know for a period of time Notre Dame dominated. Jimmy Johnson really whacked them. They didn't want to play for a while. And I know that, the rivalry isn't the same now as it used to be back in the day when those two schools hated each other. But the Miami Hurricane and the Notre Dame, there was a lot of hate between those two schools, weren't they, Mel?
Yeah, what they called it, the something versus the thugs or something. I can't remember what they had. They had some little kind of moniker for it, and obviously the guys from Miami didn't like it.
Right.
But that's when Notre Dame was Notre Dame, and Notre Dame, was a good football team, and Miami was just an up and coming program at that particular time. So Miami had a lot to prove, and Notre Dame was the king of the hill at that particular time. And those are some battles that they had. And they look forward to it. I mean, there's a lot of trash talking going on and everything back then.
Yeah, there was, because I remember Howard Schnellenberger. I was at a Notre Dame when I think Miami beat them like 22-0, and they were starting to turn that rivalry around. Jimmy Johnson waxed them a few times for a while, and they didn't play. But yeah, there's no love lost between those two schools nowadays. It's a different animal.
ESPN, Scott, Mel. Yeah, ESPN had a real nice, in-depth documentary about that you're talking about, the Miami Notre Dame rivalry, and they did a hell of a job. And that, I know I saw it a couple of years ago, so you could probably still Google it and try to find it. It's really worth your watching, because they took and dissected that whole thing, like you said, whether it was the thugs versus the Catholics or whatever they called it. Right. It was quite the rivalry, like you guys said.
Ugly. All right, well, Mel, you talked about the Ivy League. Let's give the Ivy League a little bit of love on this broadcast, all right? When the Ivy League talks, there's always a domino effect, a knee-jerk reaction. So, they've already made the decision. They're not doing any sports in the fall. Do you think that this is, right now, the Big Ten Soccer non-conference, that's the first big domino to drop? And perhaps even Gene Smith of Ohio State said he wouldn't be surprised if it goes a step further. This is the first move. So what are your thoughts about the Ivy League taking it upon themselves to cancel sports during the fall season? That was a bold move by them, albeit their budget's probably $11 million a year, but that's not the point. The point is they've been ahead of this whole thing from the beginning, and now they're taking it upon themselves to lead the way again, Mel.
Yeah, I mean, those academic institutions, they just tolerate sports there. So it doesn't surprise me at all that they made this. They came to this conclusion. My son, he went to Brown. He played at Brown, and those are great academic institutions. And it doesn't surprise me. And they kind of take the lead, and I think they took the lead when they canceled spring sports. I think they were talking about. I don't know if they're going to do it or not, but they were talking about playing in the spring, rather playing football in the spring. I don't know if that's still a possibility or not. But again, to put on these sports in this climate right now with no fans is expensive.
Right.
It's very expensive, and it could be to the detriment of other sports, whether they play or not. Obviously not playing is going to cost them money because you're still providing aid or scholarships to these players, although they don't really have scholarships in the Ivy League. But not to have that revenue is going to be, it's going to hurt. But putting the players at risk far outweighs, the benefit from the revenue. Because all it takes is just one. And who wants to have that on their watch? That they decided to go out there and ignore everything and go out there and play sports, and God forbid something happened to one of these kids who you've gone in, you sat in the parents' living room, and basically the parents have handed this child off to you for 4 or 5 years, and he's under your care. Basically, that's your child. So who wants to live with that?
Yeah,
I don't know anybody that want to do it. Right now the guidance that we're getting from Washington, you can't really trust anything right now that we're getting from Washington. So you kind of have to go, even in high school. Whether or not to send your kids to school or not. People don't know what to do right now.
Yeah, no, they don't.
They have no clue.
Let's talk about them playing in the spring. And this is a stretch, I think, anyways, because nobody really knows what's going on, Mel and George. Anyhow, But again, they're talking about playing a non-conference, I think in the spring. Was it 7 games or whatever? And they don't play for bowl games anyways in the Ivy League. They play for the prestige of winning the whole thing anyhow. So, but let's just move the clock ahead. Do you really think that any conference would go ahead and play during the spring, knowing full well that maybe there's a chance to get some kind of revenue? I mean, nobody cares about the NFL draft, doesn't care about the colleges anyways, and how you define a prospect, because that's a different animal. But let's talk about spring football, college style, Mel.
Well, I think the idea of playing in the spring is to give this virus a little chance to run its course, or for us to be able to get our arms wrapped around this thing, get some kind of control of it, or get some kind of therapeutics or a vaccine. And that's the only reason why you're just kicking the can down the road a little bit further. That's all you're trying to do is kick the can down a little bit further. We thought that, when this first was, when they first talked about this February, early March, fall seemed like a long ways away. It seemed like we'd be able to get our arms around this thing, and we'd get this thing figured out. Well, we haven't. We're no closer today to figuring this thing out than we were when, in late February, early March. So you just try to kick the can down the road a little bit further and see if we can't get our arms wrapped around this thing, if we can't get some kind of control, or we can get some therapeutics, or whether or not we can, delay it long enough to be able to get a vaccine, so that people's lives aren't at risk. Because this, like I said, this disease, the spectrum, is from asymptomatic, not having any symptoms, to death. And it really doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't really matter, whether you're old or whether you're young. I mean, we had the Broadway guy who was 41 years old.
Right.
It devastated him. I mean, it devastated me. He had to have his leg amputated. Then they're talking about doing double lung transplants. And then, finally his body just gave out. There's been teenage individuals that have passed away from this. I mean, who wants that on their watch?
Right.
I wouldn't want it on my watch. I wouldn't feel comfortable putting my kid out there in that environment and having to compete. I wouldn't be comfortable as a parent. I wouldn't be comfortable. Right.
Hey, for whatever it's worth.
No, I was just going to add that, Scott and Mel, but the thing is that you can never put money over someone's life. And I know that this has just devastated and decimated the athletic director, the athletic department budgets. We all know that. I mean, that's their prime bread and butter, football and college basketball.
Right.
But you're right, Mel. You can never, and who's going to want to be on that watch, whether it's a pro athlete or especially a college athlete, that something like this happens and devastates the entire world even further than it's been devastated so far.
Hey, if anything comes out of this, at least maybe for those people that have too many bowl games, good riddance to the bowl games, since you have 37 of them anyways. Give us a break from all that saturation. And I'm kidding here, okay, guys, because I've always liked the bowl games as a way to give prospects another chance to go ahead and play in front of scouts. So I'm trying to add a little light to the situation. Hope you guys understand that anyways.
Sure.
But you're right, Mel. It's not worth placing a young college student or any young adult subject to these conditions. I don't care who you are, whether it's a college student, high school, or whatever. I even heard there's talk today that Texas football could be in trouble, and we all know how Texas high school football is, right, Mel? It's big there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's out of control, the virus there. I think it's up 800% or something like that right now. I mean, it's, from where it was a month ago or something like that. It's out of control. So, we have to wait and see. Everything right now is up in the air. Everything right now is up in the air. And, as you were talking, George, this is decimated. I mean, athletic departments, for the most part, I mean, obviously you have some of your big schools that are doing well, but there's a lot of athletic departments that are operating in the red. I know UCLA's athletic department, I think they're $18 million in a hole before all this happened, because they're paying, I think they're still paying Jim Mora. I think they might have finished up paying Carl Durrell. Now they're paying Chip Kelly all this money. They couldn't fire him if they wanted to, just like Clay Helton. I mean, USC couldn't fire Clay Helton. They wanted to, but they couldn't. They couldn't afford to do it. And now this happened. So, I don't know what's going to happen. You're going to see a lot more schools. They're going to do away with more of these non-revenue generating sports. And it's going to be unfortunate.
It's devastating, and it's going to be, the ripple effect is going to last for years and years. You're absolutely right. But again, it goes back to putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, with college football and the powerhouse that they are, it's just, you never know if some terrible catastrophe like this happens, and it did, then you're left holding the bag and wondering what the heck to do. I mean, Jim Harbaugh took a pay cut, and Juwan Howard did. That's good. And Ward Manuel at U of M. But obviously, if they can't put fannies in the big house, they're in deep doo-doo. And so are all the other stadiums. I'm not just singling out Michigan.
Well,
but again, everywhere from Alabama to Georgia to Ohio State to UCLA and USC. I mean, everywhere across the land. I mean, as we know, they just depend tremendously on the college football game. And but again, reiterating what you said earlier, Mel and Scott, I mean, you can't sacrifice the life of anyone, not even a single person, a single athlete. And yeah, if I hit kids that age, you're right, I'd be scared too right now.
Well, I still got to say that I hand it to the Ivy League for taking the lead on this and canceling sports altogether in the fall. I really do. And like Mel's been saying with me, broadcast in and broadcast out, okay, we can't get a handle on this, and now football is finally feeling it. It's one thing, Mel, when we talked about the NFL draft, what was it, in April, okay, that was all good, positive news, information, blah, blah, blah. But now all of a sudden, training camps are just a couple of weeks away. All these bubbles taking place. And I've said on before, and I'll say it again, I think the only professional sport that might actually get out of this thing in decent shape is the National Hockey League, because they're playing in Canada, both in Toronto and Edmonton, and they're playing a sport that involves cold, okay, and equipment. But as far as the other ones, even Adam Silver says if there's a crack in this bubble, we're in trouble. I've been working with Don Mattingly a little bit, with the Marlins. And he right now knows that in South Florida, we're one of the hot spots for this virus. And, Don realizes the frequency of the testing. And yet he told me today that, I understand what's going on around us, but he still has to do what he's got to do. And we're not even sure whether opening day will be opening day. And yet they're releasing the 2021 schedule next year. And yet we only have 60 games. So yeah, you talk about a domino effect. That's it. So let's move on to the NFL for a bit, guys. Okay, and we're talking about the NFL may be banning post-game jersey swaps and the interactions within 6 feet. I guess, are you surprised or expected, or what are your thoughts about this one?
Well, I think it's I don't think sweat all game long, so I don't understand what the big deal is.
Yeah, right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think it's a small move. It's something that the players have cherished, so they've come to really expect it, and they love it. To do the swap and to get another jersey from another player. But I mean, it's just one small step. But I mean, it's not gonna really solve anything. As far as cutting out the contact, because like Mel said earlier, it's a contact sport. We know that in pro football, they're going up against each other on the line. They're tackling. They're sweating on top of each other. They're kicking each other in the nuts or whatever they're doing. But I mean, it's a contact sport, and it's easy to spit. Unfortunately, infect somebody if they happen to have symptoms. So just the jersey thing alone is just a token kind of thing, right, Mel?
Yeah, I definitely believe that. The other thing is, because there's different degrees of this illness as far as how people react to becoming infected, that's also going to determine the recovery time too. I mean, they're acting like this is just like a common cold. It's not a common cold. I mean, if somebody gets infected with this, everybody reacts differently. A big offensive lineman may not recover as quickly as maybe a skilled guy, and then again, the ripple effect from that one person. I don't know how they're going to be able to do it. I have no clue. I really think it's wishful thinking right now to believe that we're going to have a football season, whether it be college or pro. I think it's wishful thinking. With the college game, you got 100 and some odd players on the team. Then you got all the support staff, you got all those people. I mean, basically, and then, even when you get it, do you have immunity? We don't even know that. You might have it temporarily, 2, 3, 4 months, but it could come back again. And if it does come back again, does it come back with a vengeance? Does it come back worse, or is it milder? There's so many unknowns with this virus that you just said to like, well, why did I even want to play with this? You know, I mean, why play with this? I mean, you're talking about people's lives, so why take that chance? So the best thing that they could probably do is just say, hey, you know, we got to cancel everything until we get our arms around this. Well, particularly football, because of the type of sport that it is, until we can get our arms wrapped around this. Now, if they were able to get into some type of bubble, type of atmosphere, and get all these teams in one area and lock the players up for 16 weeks or whatever the case may be, okay, then maybe you have a better chance. But doing it the way that we're doing it, where some states are, you know, like Atlanta, you know, like Georgia rather, you know, where we're right now, you know, we're catching heck with this thing right now. Texas is, you know, catching hell with this. California, you know, there's teams in each one of those states.
Right.
And, you know, you're going to go play in New York. You're going to take that ember from California and bring it to New York. And next thing you know, you have a hot spot then. You know, now those players are infected and they're going out, they're interacting, they're going to restaurants or doing whatever it is they're doing, and the thing flares back up again. So it's just too many unknowns, too many variables. I just think it's too risky.
Yeah,
you're right. I agree. Yeah. And then you got guys like umpire Joe West who says, oh, well, that's just a virus thing and all that. And then, I don't know if you heard, but the umpire was identified because he's of his age and his symptoms, possible symptoms, or whatever. He was identified as somebody that the MLB did not want to bring back. I guess they told him privately, Joe, why don't you retire? Well, Joe West is only 65 games away from becoming the all-time greatest umpire in the number of games he's umpired. But here's a case where, putting a man's career and his livelihood risk him and other players around him when he umpires is ridiculous. The league tried to get, in his case, I'm not trying to say he doesn't have the talent anymore to umpire, but his skills have gone down. And he's a cowboy. He's a big show-off. Joe West. We've known him for years. But, here's the guy where the league tried to take him aside and say, Joe, this isn't the right thing for you. It isn't the right thing for our sport. And he's fighting it. Right now, he's fighting it. I saw in the paper today.
Well, let me get back to what you said, Mel, and that's this. You are right, okay? Forget about canceling preseason games, okay? That's nothing. We lost the Hall of Fame game, right? Big deal, okay? Preseason. Then we're talking about this. When the NFL gets stomped with the whole thing and you start losing real games, you know what? Welcome to the Olympics being canceled. Welcome to March Madness. That's when the NFL will feel the ripple effect, like you say, Mel, of all these major events. They've just had to wait a little bit longer until August and September, where reality has struck. You know what I mean? They've had to wait longer to drink the Kool-Aid, as they say, right, Mel and George?
Yeah,
that's true.
I definitely believe
that's true.
Yep.
And the fact that, like you mentioned, Scott, that is unbelievable to think that you postpone not only the NCAA finals, tournament and finals, but also the Summer Olympic Games. You can't get too bigger things like that. And, of course, the Kentucky Derby has been moved. The Indy 500 has moved. We go on and on. The Masters has been moved. They're trying to, do all those in the fall. But it's just like you said, guys, it's the fear of the unknown. We don't have a control over this, and we don't know what lies ahead.
Well, think about it. For tennis fans out there, Wimbledon won't even be played this year. They don't play until next year.
That's right.
Yeah,
yep.
I don't know about you guys from a tennis standpoint. I think Wimbledon is easily number one, U.S. Open, and then the other two, Australia and French, toss a coin about which one's third and fourth. I don't know, but I've always thought that Wimbledon's a bucket list kind of thing. The U.S. Open is too, but for us, it's a 19-hour trip up I-95 to get there here in Florida. But Wimbledon's always a bucket list. So when you put things in perspective about everything that we've talked about tonight, COVID-19 and all, it is what it is. So as we talk about these, let's continue while we have another few more minutes to go in the broadcast. Let's talk about some more Detroit memories. George, you have any more things you want to bring up to Mel at all, since we've dug deep into the COVID-19 thing on a lot of different levels?
Well, yeah. The fact that the Lions have not won one playoff game since 1957 is just one of the biggest jokes in all of sports. And obviously, it's the crowning, uncrowning glory of the Ford administration here. So, Mel, what do you think? Now, Mrs. Ford, of course, Martha Firestone Ford, hands and reins over her daughter. She is not totally unexpected. We all knew that Bill Ford Jr. was pushed aside. The rumor has it that he was Daddy's boy, and was given a chance, and things kind of blew up there when they hired Nat Millen and things like that. So there's no question in my mind that once Martha took over, she was going to favor her daughters in running the team. But I read some things about her, and I mean, she seems to be a sharp lady. And but the question is, can they get over the jinx, Mel and Scott, and do something on the field and win with this regime they have now, which is, steroids, New England Patriots on steroids or whatever they're trying to do.
Yeah, I don't think that I don't think she'll keep them. I don't know necessarily if those were her hires. I mean, she may have been involved in the talks and bringing them over there. I think they're on borrowed time. I mean, they're dead man walking right now, in my opinion, with this changeover. I'm actually looking forward to it. I remember as a kid when we were in the Silverdome, and our box was right next to the Ford's box. And we used to go in there, and my dad used to always take us in there, and we'd go in there with Mr. and Mrs. Ford, and Bill Jr. would be in there. And I never met this daughter here, but I always met Elizabeth was always in there. Those are the only two that I can remember meeting, is Bill Jr. and Elizabeth. Bill Ford had his chance, and he blew it. When he hired Matt Millen, that was a joke. I mean, he was the laughing stock of the league. I mean, Matt Millen was a joke. What he did to that franchise, I mean, it's just unbelievable. And I can't believe it took him so long to get rid of him. I look forward to it. I'm cautiously optimistic. I think that, as a female, women they run businesses a little bit differently, I believe. I'm hoping that she's going to be a lot truer than her dad, and really demand excellence. Trying to replicate the New England way, they got to come up with a Detroit Lions way, and winning starts from the top. And my problem with the Fords is this has always been kind of like a plaything for them. It's kind of been like Monopoly or something. It's just been a game to them. They haven't taken it seriously. Win or lose, they're making money either way. It doesn't matter, especially with the new stadium downtown. That thing is sold out regardless of how poor the product is on the field. Hopefully, this young lady is, being around her mom a little bit, being around the game, the last number of years. Hopefully, she's learned something. And hopefully we can come up with a Detroit Lions way and bring the city a much-deserved trip to the Super Bowl. Heck, if we win, great. But let's get there. And like you said, the first hurdle is to win a playoff game. Let's win a playoff game. I think the last playoff game they won was when my dad was there. I mean, I think that score was like 5-0 or something like that. I can't even remember. But something like that. So let's get over that first hurdle. Let's get to the playoffs. Let's win a playoff game. Let's develop a winning culture there, a place where people will want to come and people will want to, other free agents will want to come and be a part of it. Because, like I said, we were talking earlier, I never thought I would leave Detroit. Detroit was a great city for me and our family. I mean, growing up, there's no better place than Detroit. When I was out of school at UCLA, and we were talking about different places, you couldn't talk bad about Detroit. I mean, back then we had the bad boy Pistons going on, and you couldn't say anything negative about Detroit. That was my city, and I was very, very proud of my city. Now, not so much. The Pistons aren't doing so great. The Tigers haven't been doing so great. They had the first pick in the draft. And now, the Lions have never been doing great. I mean, everybody always had high expectations, but by week 6, those expectations were, we'll get them next year. That's always kind of how we are as Lions fans. We'll wait till next year. And next year comes and nothing ever changes. So I'm glad to see her take control. I'm looking forward, but I'm cautiously optimistic about
sure
what we'll see as far as success on the field.
Yeah, amazingly enough.
I'm the same way.
Amazingly enough, when your dad played, correct me if I'm wrong, okay, I think the Lions lost to the Dallas Cowboys, was it 5-0 back then?
Yeah.
And then I think the only playoff game that they won, I was actually in Pasadena, California when the Wolverines were at the Rose Bowl, and George was covering for me back then, and they whipped the Cowboys, I think 38-6, I believe at the time.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
At the Silverdome, you're correct, Scott,
Right.
on both counts. The 5-0 loss that your dad was in, Mel Jr., was December 26, 1970. It's the only NFL playoff game in recorded history that had that weird of a score, a 5-0 final.
Well, Mel,
Poor Greg Landry couldn't get it going for your dad's team back then.
Well, Mel, do you want to know another interesting irony? Okay, and I take a lot of pride in this, too. You know when the Lions won their last championship was in 1957. Do you know what date it was?
I have no clue.
My birthday, December 29th, 1957, 5 years prior to me getting hatched. My parents were married in 1960, so you know what? I'll always remember that on my birthday, the Lions won it 1957, but I wasn't even born. And you know what? Let's just have a little fun with the numbers, okay? The Lions lost 5-0 to the Cowboys, and then back in 71, and the irony is 5 years before I was born. So, Mel, if there's a state lottery out in Atlanta and you want to tie 1962 to that 5 and you win it, okay, Mel, I don't want to know about it. Fair enough? Okay?
Fair enough.
I'm giving you a hint. Now, if you win, I don't want to know about it, okay? And I'll still treat you over at the Big Chicken the next time, although knowing you'll probably find us someplace better to eat now that we ate there anyhow. But just a little bit for all those lottery people out there listening, that 1957 is your 4-digit number. Okay, December 29th, and then you have 5. Figure out the combination. Who knows what Powerball will be next. So, trying to put it all in perspective.
That's not going to win.
Huh?
Yeah.
Nothing associated with the Lions is going to win.
Wow, come on, Mel. Wishful thinking, I guess, right?
If I could just interject, this is George here.
Right.
I tell people, they'll say, "Oh, the Lions have never done anything in your lifetime, George." And I said, "Wait a minute, fella. Wait a minute. I was sitting on Daddy's lap on that date that you just mentioned, Mr. Morgan Roth. The Lions won the championship over the Cleveland Browns because George here was born in February of 1956. So I tell a little joke. I says, I was a baby. Daddy was listening to Van Patrick call that game on the radio, and I was on his lap. So don't give me this stuff about my lifetime. Yes, I have seen the Lions win in my lifetime an NFL championship.
He's got us there, Mel. He's got us there. If he's bringing up Van Patrick, he's definitely got us there, Mel.
Yeah.
Well, the band was on the national.
Do you remember it?
What's that?
Oh, heck no, of course not.
Yeah, do you remember it, though?
Do you remember it?
Not at all, Mel. Can't remember a thing. I did. Hey, listen, though, guys. It is available, again, just like everything is on the Internet. You guys should look that up. The 1957 Lions-Browns game, and the highlights reel was narrated by Van Patrick now, but I don't know if he actually got to call that game because it might have been on CBS or what they call mutual radio. It could have been a national broadcast. They might have aced out the local guys. I don't know. But, yeah, what a team. Van Patrick and Bob Reynolds calling your dad's action. Mel, those two, and Scotty, you know, two of the greatest announcers we've ever had in this town.
Well, you know, it's amazing how you bring up Bob Reynolds. Remember, George, you and I, Mel, you're going to like this one. We were at the Silverdome. I had a picture taken with Gordie Howe, and George was in the background, and I had a busted up shoulder, and I was in a sling with Gordie Howe. Of course, I would later make up for that photo when it came to Coral Springs, Florida. But George is in the background over at the Silverdome while we were covering the game together. I was with Bob Reynolds and Gordie Howe. How about that, Mel? You want to talk about some Detroit memories or what, Mr. Farr?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great memories there, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, they are. The legend lives on.
You know, even though some of the years have been lean, but, you know, and your dad was a pioneer, Mel. I got to tell you, you know, the riots of 67 and your dad, entrepreneur, doing what he did. And, you know, I know he loved playing tennis and, you know, the things that he did and integrating your family into the neighborhood and the well-to-do part of Oakland County. I mean, your father and your family, your mom and everybody, I mean, you guys have turned out so great. And, And I can't say enough about, what your dad's impact was on our community, Mel, and your family as well.
Well, you know what, Mel? I think this is a time when you tell Mr. Eichorn what you're doing for the metropolitan area. We've certainly had you on doing it before, but why don't you tell him what you do with the youth out in Michigan, Mel? Perfect opportunity for you.
We wanted to try to do something in my dad's honor, and what we did is there's a guy down in Houston, Texas, who has a showcase. It's called the Houston Senior Showcase, and all we did is we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just doing the same thing down here in Georgia, and we also had our first one up there in Detroit this year. It was held at Country Day, and what it is it's an opportunity for kids who did not get a Division I scholarship to showcase their talents in front of Division II, Division III, and NAIA schools. And they get scholarships right there in the spot. Now, this is free for the kids, and it's free for the coaches that come in. So we had about 20-some-odd schools up there at Country Day, and we had about just a little under 100 kids in our first one. It actually was a snowstorm that day. But and kids would come up afterwards and come up, man, I got my first offer. I never had an offer. I never got an offer. And that makes it's a lot of work to put these things on, but that makes it worth the while when you have kids come up to you and kids' parents come up to you thanking you for the opportunity. Thank you for getting my kid an opportunity to get a scholarship, and then these kids go on visits and things of that nature, and they're real excited about it. So we do one down here in Michigan. I mean, down here in Georgia, it's the Georgia Showcase, and up there in Michigan, it's the Motor City Showcase. And we had some great help from the Michigan High School Football Coaches Association. We put it on in conjunction with them and had a really, really nice event up there at Country Day. The one thing about we wanted to do it in Michigan at first, but we're down here. We're kind of entrenched in high school football because my nephew played high school football down here, so we kind of knew our way around high school football. We knew where we could hold it, have a venue where we could hold it. The thing about it in Michigan was being able to have a venue that time of year, because this is done right after signing day. So right after signing day, and these kids don't sign, we had our camp. I think it was on the 8th. I think signing day was on the 5th, I believe it was. And so National Signing Day was on the 5th, so I think we had it on the 8th, the second National Signing Day. And then the one down here we had in March, because they're kind of staged, because we have my college coach does one in California. A guy that I played with, he does one in Carolina. The guy who started it, he has it down in Houston, and then there's a one down there that's done by the Orange Bowl that's down in Miami. So there's a few showcases that are done around the country, and it's all of them are the same. They're always going to be the same. It's always going to be free for the kids, and it's always going to be free for the coaches as well.
That's wonderful, Mel. That's tremendous, and I know that your foundation is doing great work, and thanks for sharing that with me. I'm so sorry I didn't get a chance to come out there and see you, but I'll make sure I'm there for the next one that you have in the Motor City, Mel.
Well, great. Look forward to it. Appreciate it.
Well, like I said, this has really been a neat night here. Mel obviously is our football analyst, and, George is my mentor of sorts. And to me, it's just so great to have both of you on the same. And hopefully we'll be able to do it again sometime soon. How would you like that? You guys like to do it again sometime?
Absolutely. It's a joy and a pleasure to be on with both of you.
You know what, George? Why don't you let Mel know about the book that you wrote? Go ahead. This is your opportunity to let everybody know about the book that you've written about broadcasters, since you brought up Van Patrick.
Yeah, Mel, and your listening audience here. Way back in the early days of my career, I had just loved following sports on radio and television, and Scott, of course, did too. And I used to write a weekly column in the Detroit Monitor called Sports on Television. And what it was is a chance for me to see people like Jimmy Greek and the late Phyllis George and Brent Musburger and Irv Cross and write stories about those guys. And, then I took a different angle. I says, wait a minute. What I'd like to do is write a book about the Detroit and Michigan guys, some of whom have made it big, and we know that. John Saunders. I mean, there's so many of them. George Allen, the former football coach. My gosh, he was with Lindsey Nelson on the CBS broadcast. and of course Jim Brandstatter, and we mentioned Reynolds and Van Patrick. So what I did is I hunted down a bunch of photographs. Ernie Harwell was gracious, and Paul Perry, and these guys. And so it's football, basketball, hockey, and baseball, and it's the local sportscasters that have done a great job representing our city and our state. And we put this all into a book. It's black and white. There's the cover is color, but the inside is all black and white, and it's about $20. And I still sell it and autograph it for anybody that would like to buy one. It's also available online at arcadiapublishing.com, or you could get it, of course, just simply at amazon.com. And it's called Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air. And like I said, it's got a lot of football in it, especially with Van Patrick, Bob Reynolds, Frank Beckman, Mark Champion, Dan Miller, all those great Lion announcers we've had throughout the many years. And thanks, Scott, for letting me mention it on the air. Thanks, Mel.
It's so appropriate. You know what, Mel? I'm also in the book on one page. I'm actually Muhammad Ali and Jimmy Connors with myself on the same page. So, you know, you talk about the fact that George and I have worked together for the better part of 40 years, and to bring you on here and reflect on the Lions, plus what you're doing, and talk some football. To me, it's just really, really, really neat when you get these opportunities to create memories. And tonight, I view this broadcast as Motown memories, because you know what, Mel? Even though I know you played at UCLA, you were born in California, you now reside in the Georgia area. You know, all three of us still feel like there's a special place. You know, we're Detroit Lions people. I'm thankful that the Lions, I covered them for a lot of years, where they got me credentialed 4 Super Bowls, George a couple as well. So they've been good to us. You know, obviously the success on the field hasn't been as good as we would like it, but you know what? They still have been a big part of all of our lives. So, you know, to me, it's really, really neat. I've been looking forward to this broadcast for a long time, and I'm looking for another act as well. And hopefully, you know, maybe the next time we come on the program, we'll have more upbeat news instead of dealing with COVID-19. But Mel, you know, George knows how deeply I feel about you, that I'm so pleased that you're on here week in and week out with me on the Sports Exchange. And you know what, Mel, I should point out, our first show together, George Eichorn and I, we were on the Sports Exchange together. How do you like that?
That's great. Full circle.
Oh, yeah, hasn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. But it's been a great time. Thank you again, Mel, for letting me on, and Scott, of course. I appreciate the opportunity to join you guys.
All right, Mel, why don't you let everybody know?
We certainly appreciate it.
Mel, let everybody know how they can get a hold of you, and then I'll go over mine, and then we'll be all ready to wrap it up. Okay, go ahead. Let people know how they get a hold of you, Mel.
Yeah, all the social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at Mel Farr Jr., email melfarjr@gmail.com, and then you can follow what we have going on with the, as far as for the kids in the area, at melfar.org.
And as for us, you can reach us at Twitter at Tribune South, Facebook, like our page, South Florida Tribune, Instagram, South Florida Tribune Gets It Done. I have a YouTube channel. The only regret I have, Mel, but I didn't have it created, was we didn't do a video. But the fact that you're up I-75, we will the next time. But the YouTube channel is South Florida Tribune. Our website is www.southfloridatribune.com. Email me at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Scott Morganroth. And you are listening to the Sports Exchange WSAN Network. And you can find this broadcast on www.southfloridatribune.com or wherever you get your podcasts. So on behalf of George Eichorn and Mel Farr, my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth, thanking you for joining us tonight. And we will catch you on the next edition of the Sports Exchange.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, guys.